In the diagram, OPQR is a parallelogram. RX is equal to a third of XQ. Y is the midpoint of PQ. OP is equal to A and OR is equal to B. Find in terms of A and B, PR. Now when we have PR means that we start at P and we end at R. And so that means that we're gonna go from P to O and then from O to R. And so that means that PR is equal to, when we go from P to O, and that's gonna be negative A. And the reason why it's a negative A, because we're going in the opposite direction of A. Notice that A is going in, let's look at A, right? A is going in, let's use this color. A is going in this direction. That's the direction of A, but we are going from P to O. So we're going in the opposite direction. So it's going to be negative A, That's why we have a negative A. Let me put plus B because we're going from O to R. And then that means that we have to use B. And so that's positive B because we're going in the same direction as B. And so that means that PR is equal to negative A plus B. Next, we have to do OQ. And OQ means that we start at O, but we end at Q. And so that means that we'll go from O to P, and then from P to Q. So O to P, then from P to Q. And so OQ is equal to A. The reason why we use A is because when we go from O to P, we use A. And then when we go from P to Q, we use B. And the reason why we use B is because this side, right, and this side are equal because this is a parallelogram. And so what does that mean? Well, that means that if this right here is B, right, if this right here is B, that means that this right here must also be B as well. And that's because these two sides are equal, all right? These two sides are equal in length, and it's a parallelogram. So they are not only equal in length, but they are also parallel to each other, all right? So that means that if this is B, this must also be B as well. And so OQ is equal to A plus B. Next, we have to do XY. Now XY means that we start at X and we end at Y. And so we are going from X to Q, then from Q to Y, all right? So X to Q, and then from Q to Y. Okay, so, but before we even figure out what is X, Y, we're gonna do RQ. We're gonna figure out what RQ is. Well, if you look at RQ means that we go from R to X, then from X to Q. That's what RQ is. RQ is RX plus XQ, X to Q, okay? So that's what RQ is, right? Now, what is RX though? What is RX? Well, RX, they told us that RX is equal to a third of XQ, so let's substitute that in. So RX is equal to a third of XQ. So that means that RQ is equal to a third XQ plus XQ. Now, what is a third XQ plus 1 XQ? All right. So a third XQ plus 1 XQ is going to be equal to 4 over 3 XQ. Now, why is that the case? That's the case because if you notice carefully, let's do this. This right here is a third XQ, right? This right here is 1 XQ. So we basically have 1 over 3 plus a whole, all right? But what is a whole? Well, a whole is equal to, so we have 1 over 3, so this is going to be 1 over 3 plus, what is a whole? What is a whole? A whole is, we could express a whole as 3 over 3. And so what we basically have, and so let me write this properly, it's going to be 3 over 3. So this is 3 over 3. So we have 1 over 3 plus a whole, and that equals to 1 over 3 plus 3 over 3. But what is 1 over 3 plus 3 over 3? Well, we do 1 plus 3, and 1 plus 3 is 4. And we keep the denominator the same, so it's 4 over 3. And so that means that 1 over 3 x cubed plus 1, right? X cubed is actually equal to 4 over 3 x cubed, all right? And so that's how we got that. And so what do we have now? So we have r cubed is actually equal to 4 over 3 x cubed. Now, since we're trying to figure out what is x cubed, we're going to multiply both sides of this equation by 3 over 4. And we do that because we want to cancel this 3 with this 3 and this 4 with that 4. And so that means on this side, we'll just have x cubed. And then on the left-hand side, we have r, and on the left-hand side, we have 3 over 4 multiplied by r cubed. And so we have 3 over 4 multiplied by r cubed. So x cubed is actually equal to 3 over 4 r cubed. And so x cubed is equal to 3 over 4 r cubed. And so now that we know what is x cubed, we know that x cubed is equal to 3 over 4 r cubed based on what we just calculated. But what is r cubed? Well, if we notice carefully, right, if we notice carefully, let's use this. r cubed is this, right? That's what r cubed is, right? r cubed is this. And if we notice at the bottom, we know that this is a, right? So if this is a, right, that means that r cubed must also be a as well, because you're looking at a parallelogram. These two sides are equal and these two sides are also parallel to each other. So if OP is equal to A, all right, that means that R cubed is also equal to A. And so what does that mean? That means that X cubed, all right, that means that X cubed is actually equal to 3 over 4, right? 3 over 4 R cubed, but what is R cubed? R cubed is A, right? So it's going to be 3 over 4 A, okay? And that's what we need to determine. We need to determine what is X cubed. And we learned that X cubed is equal to 3 over 4 A. Okay, so let's answer this question. So now what we have, let me erase this. So X cubed, right? X cubed is equal to 3 over 4 A. So X cubed is equal to 3 over 4 A. And then Rx is equal to 1 over 4 A, okay? Because the whole thing is A. So if this thing is 3 over 4 A, right? Then the other side, the other remaining portion is just going to be 1 over 4 A. Because if you add these two together, it gives you a whole. So if this side is 3 over 4 A, then RQ is just going to be 1 over 4 A. Okay, so now that we have what XQ is, let us answer our question. So remember, we're trying to figure out what XY is. In order to get XY, we have to go from X to Y. So we have to go from X to Q, which we now know is 3 over 4A. Then we have to go from Q to Y, all right? Now what is QY? We already know what XQ is. We already know what XQ is, that's 3 over 4A. What is QY? Well, the good thing is that we already know that, let me use let me use a highlighter. The good thing is that we already know that this whole thing, right? This whole thing is B, right? But if we're going in this direction, it's going to be negative B, all right? So this is B, so this side must also be B. But if we're going downwards in the opposite direction of this one, it's going to be negative B. But what do we know about, X? What do we know about QY? What do we know about QY? Well, QY, they said right out that Y is the midpoint. Y is the midpoint. So since Y is the midpoint, that means that Y is the middle. So that means that if the whole thing is equal to negative B, right? When we go downwards, the whole thing is negative B. And we know that Y is the midpoint. That means that QY would be equal to right? QY would be equal to, let me use this pen. QY would be equal to negative a half, right? Negative a half B, right? Because Y is the middle, all right? Y is the middle. So that means that this portion is only a half of the entire thing. I mean, the entire thing is negative B. So QY would just be negative a half B, all right? Because the whole thing is negative B. And so if Y is the middle, and we're going from Q to the middle, then we just going halfway. So it's negative a half B. And so we have everything we need. We know that XY is equal to 3 over 4 times A. That's what, I'm sorry. So we know that XY is equal to XQ plus QY, all right? Again, XY is equal to XQ plus QY, and that makes sense because we go from XQ, QY. We know that XQ is equal to 3 over 4A. That's why we have 3 over 4A. And we know that QY is equal to negative a half of B. And so that means that XY is equal to 3 over 4A minus a half B. And that's the answer that we have to this. Next, we have to move on to this one. It says that XY meets OP produced at S such that PS is equal to XQ. Write a simplified expression for XS in terms of A and B. And so we have to figure out what XS is. And XS just basically means that we start at X, but we end at S, all right? And so, okay, well, what do we know? Well, if we would just look at this direction, right? We start at X and we end at S, all right? So the first time we're gonna go from X to R, right? That's why we have XR here. Next, we're gonna go from R to O, right, in this direction. So that's R, so we have RO here. And we're gonna go from O to P. That's why we have OP here, all right? And we're gonna go from P to S. That's why we have PS here. And that is why XS is equal to XR, RO, OP, PS added all together. Okay, so that's how we get that idea. But what is PS, right? We know that PS, right? PS is actually equal to XQ. And so let's substitute that in. We know that PS is equal to XQ. And so that is something that we need to consider. Let's say, okay, so let me erase this. So PS is equal to XQ, so we just put XQ here. And XR, this is XR, right? We can write XR. We could actually switch them, right? We could actually switch them. That's what we did. We switched them to write RX. But if we switch them, we have to put the negative sign, all right? Now, these two are equal to each other. XR is equal to negative RX. All we did was we switched the R and the X, but since we switched the R and the X, the penalty for switching the R and the X is we have to put a negative sign out front. Otherwise, these two would not be equal. But since we put the negative sign out front when we switch them, these two are still the same thing, right? Okay, so that means that XS is equal to this. And so it makes sense because if we do XS, right? XS is equal to XR. Now what is XR? Let me erase everything. Erase our link. Let me go ahead and use a highlighter. Let me use a different color. Let's say we use this one. So we have XR, all right? What is XR? XR is equal to negative 1 over 4A. And that makes sense because we know that XR is going in this direction. That's XR. XR is going in this direction. And we know that this is 1 over 4A. But since we're going in the opposite direction, we're not going in the same direction as A, we have to put a negative in front. So if we are going from R to X, then we would, we wouldn't need to put the negative. But since we're going from X to R in the opposite direction, we have to put a negative. So it's actually negative 1 over 4A. That's what XR is. And so that's why we have a negative RX, because we could say, okay, RX, yeah, we're going from R to X, but we're not really going from R to X because we're going in the opposite direction. So that's why we put the negative sign right there. So the opposite direction accounts for the negative sign. So negative 1 over 4A, that's what XR is. That's what negative RX is. Negative 1 over 4A. Again, we're going from X to R, and we're going in the opposite direction from RX. Next, after we already get that, now we're going to go from R to O. Now going from R to O, we're going down. Now that's in the opposite direction of B. And so that's why we have negative B here, because we're going in the opposite direction of B. B is going upward, but negative B is going downward. So we have a negative B here. Then OP, right? OP is fine, because if we look at OP, right? If we look at OP, we're going from O to P, and OP is A. So we just have to put A here. And then we have XQ, right? What is XQ? We already know that XQ is 3 over 4A, 3 over 4A. So that's why we have XQ is 3 over 4A. And that's what we have so far. Now we just have to simplify everything. We already know that we have everything. We just have to simplify it. So we're going to first group our like terms. And so we have negative 1 over 4A plus A. So we have this A here, plus 3 over 4A. So we bring all our A's together. And we only have one B, so we put negative B here. So again, we have a negative 1 over 4A plus 1A plus 3 over 4A. And so what are we going to do? The first thing that we do is we say, okay, what is negative 1 over 4 plus 1A? Again, what is negative 1 over 4A plus 1A? And so when we add them two together, we get 3 over 4A plus 3 over 4A minus B. And 3 over 4A plus 3 over 4A is definitely 6 over 4A minus B. And 6 over 4A minus B. And then what we do? We simplify this fraction, because if you look at it, we could divide both top and bottom of this fraction by 2, right? And so it makes sense, because 6 divided by 2 is definitely 3, and 4 divided by 2 is simply 2. So we have XS is equal to 3 over 2A minus B. And so that's what XS is. And this is how we figured out what XS is. And that's the answer to this question.